Before you've ever opened a Bible, you've heard of some of these stories. The Garden of Eden, Noah's Ark, the Tower of Babel, Joseph and the coat of many colours. These are some of the oldest and most enduring stories ever recorded, shaping art, culture, film, and the way billions of people understand the world, even to this day. They all come from Genesis, the first book of the Bible. But Genesis isn't just a collection of ancient tales. It begins with the creation of the world, then follows generations of early humanity, their choices, their families, their journeys, and their faith. It lays the foundation for everything that follows. This is a story about beginnings, about identity, about the struggle to live in a world that was once perfect, and what happens after it breaks. Let's get started with Chapter 1. In the beginning, there was no sky, no land, no time, only God. Then, with intention and authority, he spoke, "Let there be light." And there was light. God saw that it was good, and separated it from the darkness. Evening passed, morning came. That was the first day. On the second day, he formed the sky, dividing the waters below from the waters above. On the third, the land rose from the seas, and with it came vegetation, grass, trees, fruit-bearing plants, each according to its kind. The fourth day brought the sun, moon, and stars, set in place to govern day and night, to mark seasons and years. On the fifth day, he filled the sea with creatures great and small, and the sky with birds in flight. Then came the sixth day. God spoke again, and the land brought forth animals, livestock, wild beasts, and insects. And last of all, he created man. "Let us make mankind in our image, after our likeness," he said. So he did, he created them. He blessed them and gave them dominion over every living thing. They were told to be fruitful, to multiply, and to care for the earth. Everything that had been made was declared good. The sky above, the waters below, the creatures of land and sea, and humankind, shaped in the image of the Creator himself. On the seventh day, God rested. He rested to mark the day as holy. A rhythm written into creation itself, 6 days of work, followed by a day set apart for rest. Creation was complete, and the work of forming the heavens and the earth had come to its close. Now the story narrows. From the wide arc of creation, the focus shifts to one place, a garden called Eden. God forms a man from the dust and breathes into him the breath of life. He becomes a living being. God plants the garden and fills it with trees, every kind that is pleasing to the eye and good for food. At the centre stand 2 trees, the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. A river flows out from Eden, dividing into 4 branches. The land is rich with gold, onyx, and aromatic resin. Eden is not just beautiful, it's also abundant. God places the man, later called Adam, in the garden to tend and keep it. He gives one command: he may eat from any tree, but not from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. If he eats from that tree, he will surely die. Then God says something unexpected. It is not good for the man to be alone. So he brings every animal before him to be named, creatures of sky and field and forest, but none are quite right, none are a true companion. So God causes the man to fall into a deep sleep. He takes one of his ribs and forms a woman. When the man sees her, he rejoices. "This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, for she was taken out of man." Together they stand in the garden, naked and unashamed. There is no fear, no hiding, no division, just harmony. Man and woman side by side, the breath of God still warm in their lungs. Eden stretches around them, and the tree of life stands near. The world is still unbroken, but the boundary has been named. One tree is not to be touched. The choice and the freedom to make it already exists. In the garden beneath the branches of the trees God had planted, there stood one that was set apart, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And near it the serpent waited. He was cunning. Of all the creatures none were more shrewd. And with a voice that twisted just enough to sow doubt, he asked the woman, "Did God really say, 'You must not eat from any tree in the garden'?" She answered plainly, "We may eat from the trees except the one in the middle. God said we must not eat it, or even touch it, or we will die." "You will not surely die," the serpent said. "God knows that when you eat it, your eyes will be opened. You'll be like him, knowing good and evil." The fruit was pleasing to the eye and desirable for gaining wisdom. She took it, she ate, and she gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate. At once their eyes were opened. They saw their nakedness and felt shame. They sewed fig leaves together for coverings, hiding from each other and from the one who made them. When God came walking in the garden in the cool of the day, they hid among the trees. But he called to the man, "Where are you?" "I heard you," he replied, "and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid." "Who told you that you were naked?" God asked. "Have you eaten from the tree I commanded you not to eat from?" The man shifted the blame. "The woman you put here with me, she gave me the fruit." The woman said, "The serpent deceived me, and I ate." So God spoke to the serpent first. He was cursed to crawl on his belly and eat dust. Enmity would rise between the serpent's line and the woman's, and one day her offspring would crush his head, though he would strike the heel. To the woman came pain in childbirth and strain in her union with her husband. To the man came toil, hard labour to bring forth food from the cursed ground. Adam gave his wife a name, Eve, because she would become the mother of all the living. They were clothed in garments made by God himself, replacing the fig leaves, but they were driven from the garden, away from the tree of life. And to the east God placed cherubim and a flaming sword, flashing back and forth to guard the way. The first disobedience had come, and with it, the long shadow of exile. Adam and Eve began life outside the garden. The world was changed now, harder, colder, but still moving forward. Eve gave birth to a son, and named him Cain, then another, Abel. The older worked the soil, the younger kept sheep. Both brought offerings to God. Cain gave from the land's produce, Abel offered the firstborn of his flock. But something was different between the two. God looked with favour on Abel's gift, and not on Cain's. No explanation is given. Only Cain's reaction is recorded, a deep, smouldering anger. God warned him, "Sin is crouching at your door. It desires you, but you must rule over it." Cain did not listen. Out in the field, he rose up and killed his brother. The first death in Scripture was not natural. It was deliberate. When God asked where Abel was, Cain replied, "Am I my brother's keeper?" But God knew. Abel's blood cried out from the ground. As judgment, Cain was cursed to wander, no longer able to grow crops, no longer anchored to the soil. But still, there was mercy. God placed a mark on him so that no one would take revenge. Even in exile, Cain was not abandoned. He settled east of Eden and built a city. He had a son named Enoch. The family line grew. Among his descendants was Lamech, a man who boasted of killing and vengeance, whose words echoed like a darker version of the curse. Meanwhile, Adam and Eve had another son, Seth. Through him, a new line began, one that would carry forward the image of God, the hope of restoration, and the fragile memory of paradise lost. This chapter is a genealogy, a list of names stretching from Adam to Noah. It begins with a reminder. When God created humanity, he made them in his image, male and female, and blessed them. Adam was 130 years old when he had a son in his likeness and named him Seth. After that, he lived many more years and had other sons and daughters. Then he died. And that becomes the rhythm of the chapter. Each man lives, has children, and then dies. Seth, Enosh, Canaan, Mahalalel, Jared, long lives, growing families, and the slow, steady march of time. But then the pattern shifts. Enoch, the seventh from Adam, lived 365 years. And then the rhythm breaks. The text doesn't say he died, it simply says, Enoch walked with God, and then he was no more, because God took him. After Enoch comes Methuselah, who lived longer than anyone, 969 years. Then Lamech, who names his son Noah, saying, he will comfort us in our labour and toil. This chapter may be a list, but it's also a bridge from creation to the coming storm. As the generations passed, the world changed. Humanity multiplied, and so did its corruption. Violence spread across the earth. Selfishness ruled. The divine breath that once animated Adam now moved through a world clouded by cruelty. God looked upon what he had made and saw how far it had fallen. The earth was filled with wickedness. Every intention of the human heart had become twisted. Grief rose within the Creator. Not surprise, but sorrow. This was not what the garden was meant to become. Yet even in the darkness, one man stood apart. Noah, righteous in his generation, walking faithfully with God. And through him, God chose to begin again. The Lord spoke to Noah, revealing a plan as devastating as it was redemptive. The earth would be cleansed with water. A flood would wash away the violence. But Noah was to build an ark, a vast wooden vessel with precise dimensions. 3 decks, a door in its side, space for his family and for pairs of every living creature. It must have sounded impossible, absurd even. The skies were clear, there was no storm on the horizon, and yet Noah obeyed. He gathered the wood, he followed the design, he prepared for a future only God could see. Meanwhile, the world continued on. Unaware of what was coming. Eating, drinking, planting, building. Noah's strange construction project may have drawn stares, even laughter. But still he worked. Still he trusted. In time the ark stood ready. The animals came 2 by 2, and Noah gathered them in. His sons, his wife, his sons' wives, all took their places. And then the rain began. Not just a drizzle, not a passing storm. The skies opened, and the fountains of the deep burst forth. Water rose from every direction, lifting the ark from the ground. The world outside was swallowed in waves, but Noah and those with him were safe inside, preserved not by luck or wood alone, but by obedience, by trust, and by a God who still desired to redeem what had gone so wrong. The flood had come, and the earth would never be the same. The ark was ready, every length of gopher wood sealed, every seam tarred. The animals, as instructed, had entered in pairs, clean beasts in 7s, unclean in 2s, guided not by man, but by instinct, shaped by God. And then, as Noah and his family crossed the threshold, the door was shut, not by human hands, but by the Lord himself. Outside, the sky shifted. Heavy clouds gathered, thick, low, unfamiliar. Then came the first drop, and another, and then a sound that had never before been heard. The roar of water breaking through the sky. Rain pounded the earth, a deluge unrelenting. But this was only the beginning. Beneath the surface, the fountains of the deep burst open, ancient waters long hidden now surging upward. The ground trembled, the wind howled, and in days all the high mountains under heaven were submerged. For 40 days and nights the rain did not stop. Cities vanished, forests were uprooted, hills became waves, but the ark remained, carried by the waters, untouched by the chaos. Inside it was dark and still. The creak of wood, the rustle of straw, the breathing of animals. A world preserved, drifting over judgment. Every living thing not sheltered in the ark was gone. The breath of life extinguished from the face of the earth. Only Noah remained, and those with him. Not because he was perfect, but because he walked with God. The waters covered the earth for 150 days. Time slowed. There was no land, no sky, no signposts or stars. Only endless motion, the slow rise and fall of waves against the hull. And then, as quietly as it began, something changed. The fountains closed, the rain stopped. The silence was almost jarring, but the waters remained, stretching far and wide. No mountaintop broke the surface, no birds returned. Yet even in the stillness, the ark floated onward, waiting, trusting that somewhere beyond the horizon, dry ground would one day appear again. Then God remembered Noah. The floodwaters had done their work. Now the winds returned, sweeping over the surface of the deep. The underground springs closed, the skies cleared, and the endless rain stopped falling. Slowly, steadily, the water began to drain away. After 150 days, the ark came to rest in the mountains of Ararat. Peaks surrounded them, still wet, still lifeless. For weeks nothing changed. Then Noah opened a window. He sent out a raven, which flew back and forth, restless and unsettled. Later, he tried a dove, but it found nowhere to land and came back to him. He waited. 7 days passed. Then he sent the dove again, and this time it returned with something in its beak, an olive leaf, still fresh, a sign. Green life had broken through the mud. The world was growing back. A week later, the dove left again. It didn't return. Months passed. The water continued to recede. Eventually, the earth was dry. God spoke, "Leave the ark." So Noah did. With his family and every creature that had survived with him, he stepped out into a changed world. The sun was higher, the air still. For the first time in over a year, there was ground beneath their feet. Noah built an altar. He took what was clean and offered it in thanks, and God received it. The smell of the offering rose into the sky, and with it came a promise. He would never destroy the earth like this again. God spoke to Noah and his sons as they stood upon the renewed earth beneath a sky that still smelled faintly of rain. They were to be fruitful now, to multiply and spread out across this cleansed land. Every living creature, beast, bird and fish, would live in awe of them. They could eat from the abundance, even the animals now, though the blood was to be left untouched, for in the blood was life, and life belonged to God. And then came the covenant. God made a lasting promise, not just with Noah, but with every living thing that had come out of the ark. Never again would the floodwaters rise to destroy the world. Never again would the sky break open in judgment like that. To mark this vow, God placed his bow in the clouds, a sweeping arc of colour that would appear after the rain. It became a sign of peace resting in the sky after the storm, and every time it appeared, God said he would remember the covenant made that day. From there, the family of Noah began again. His 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, each became the root of nations. But even in this new world, human weakness remained. One day Noah planted a vineyard. In time he drank its wine, and the wine overcame him. He lay uncovered in his tent, unaware. Ham, his son, saw him like this and went to tell his brothers. But Shem and Japheth walked in backward, covering their father with a garment, careful not to look upon him. When Noah awoke and learned what had happened, he spoke a difficult word, a curse upon Ham's son, Canaan, and a blessing upon Shem and Japheth. In this moment, we see the fragility of humanity once more. The flood had wiped the earth clean, but not the heart of man. Noah lived for 350 more years after the flood. Then he died, full of days, and was buried among the dust of the earth he had once seen, swallowed by the sea. And so the world continued, families growing, nations forming, and the echoes of a covenant hanging still in the sky. After the flood, the world begins to repopulate. The descendants of Noah's 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, spread across the earth, each forming the roots of future peoples and regions. Japheth's line stretches toward the coastlands and the far reaches of Europe and Asia. His descendants are associated with the wider, more distant nations, those who dwell far from the heart of early biblical history. Names like Gomer, Magog, and Javan are recorded, echoing through later genealogies and traditions. Ham's descendants include Cush, Egypt, Put and Canaan. From them come the peoples who will one day dwell in Africa and the Near East. Among Ham's lineage is Nimrod, a mighty hunter and early king. He establishes several great cities, including Babel, Nineveh, and Kala, names that will reappear in future texts as centers of empire and rebellion. Nimrod is described not only for his strength, but for his ambition, laying the foundations of kingdoms that will challenge divine authority. Canaan, another of Ham's sons, becomes the father of tribes like the Hittites, Jebusites, Amorites, and others. These names will later resurface as the inhabitants of the land promised to Abraham and his descendants, foreshadowing future conflict. Shem, often considered the ancestor of the Semitic peoples, includes in his line Eber, from whom the word Hebrew is believed to originate. The genealogy traces a line that will eventually lead to Abraham, anchoring the narrative in the unfolding story of Israel. His descendants remain more central to the biblical narrative and are given more detailed attention. Altogether, the chapter records the origins of 70 nations. This structured account, sometimes called the Table of Nations, is less a modern ethnography and more a theological mapping of the world's peoples. It describes not only where humanity spreads, but hints at how future destinies will unfold. Every name here is deliberate, layered with meaning and implication. A wide scattering of nations, but the path forward remains focused. The story of one particular line, one unfolding promise, is about to take center stage. The whole world speaks a single language. Unified in speech and intent, humanity begins to settle in a broad plain in the land of Shinar. There they hatch a plan to build a city with a tower that reaches the heavens. Let us make a name for ourselves, they say, lest we be scattered across the earth. It's a striking reversal. God had blessed Noah's descendants and told them to fill the earth, to spread and multiply. But here, the people resist. They seek permanence and fame, constructing with baked bricks and tar, man-made materials of ambition. The tower itself becomes a symbol of human pride, of defiance, of the desire to reach upward and control their own destiny. But God comes down to see what they're building, and he responds, not with wrath, but with a kind of divine redirection. He confuses their language, scattering them across the earth. They cannot understand each other. The building halts. The city is left incomplete, a monument to fractured unity. The place is called Babel, because there, language was confounded. But it's not merely a punishment, it's a turning point. The scattering ensures that humanity will fulfill its original calling to spread and inhabit the world, even if not by choice. From this dispersion comes a shift in focus. The narrative narrows. While nations multiply and spread, one particular lineage will now step forward into the spotlight. The chapter ends with a genealogy, Shem's line, traced all the way to Abram, who will later be known as Abraham. 10 generations link Shem to this man, living in Ur of the Chaldeans. And with this, the broad sweep of early humanity gives way to the story of one man, one family, and one covenant that will shape the rest of Scripture. From the heights of Babel to the calling of Abram, the journey shifts from the collective to the personal. It's no longer about all nations equally, but about one chosen path through which, eventually, all nations will be blessed. So Abram goes, just as he is told, taking with him Sarai, his wife, and Lot, his nephew. They travel from Haran into the land of Canaan. There, God appears again and tells Abram that this land will one day belong to his descendants. In response, Abram builds an altar, a quiet marker of gratitude and faith. But the journey is not easy. Famine drives them to Egypt, and there, Abram's trust falters. Fearing for his life, he tells Sarai to say she is his sister, not his wife. Pharaoh takes her into his house, and Abram is treated well on her account. But plagues fall upon Pharaoh's household, and the truth comes out. Pharaoh confronts Abram and sends them away. It's a moment of tension and failure. Abram, chosen by God, still struggling to walk with courage, yet the story does not end in judgment. God protects Sarai, and Abram returns to Canaan. This first step into Abram's story reveals both the weight of divine calling and the fragility of human response. He leaves everything familiar, moves through foreign lands, falters in fear, and still holds on to the thread of promise. He is not heroic in every moment, but he listens, he moves, and the covenant begins. Abram returns from Egypt, traveling back through the Negev with his wife, his nephew Lot, and all their possessions. He is wealthy now. Livestock, silver, and gold weigh heavily on his caravan. They move slowly, retracing their steps to the place near Bethel, where Abram had once built an altar. There he returns to worship, calling on the name of the Lord once more. But with prosperity comes pressure. The land cannot support both Abram and Lot's growing herds and households. Quarrels break out between their herdsmen, and tensions rise. It is a quiet kind of conflict, born not of enmity, but of abundance. Abram, seeking peace, speaks gently to Lot. "Let's not quarrel between us, for we are family. If you go left, I'll go right. If you go right, I'll go left." Lot lifts his eyes and sees the fertile plain of the Jordan Valley, lush like a garden. He chooses it at once, settling near the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, places already known for their wickedness. It is a decision made with the eyes, not the heart. After Lot departs, God speaks again. Abram is told to lift his own eyes. "All the land you see, I will give to you and your offspring forever." The promise expands. It is no longer just about a destination, but about a future that stretches beyond counting. Your descendants will be like the dust of the earth, so numerous they cannot be measured. So Abram moves his tents once more, this time to the oaks of Mamre, near Hebron. There he builds another altar, another marker of faith. He has no map, no children, no timeline, but he has a promise, and he moves forward with it. This chapter draws the line between two paths. Lot's decision shaped by what is seen, and Abram's shaped by what is promised. The land stretches before him, empty and vast, yet already spoken for. 4 kings from the east march westward, sweeping through the valley with force. They clash with 5 kings of the plain, and the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah are caught in the middle. The invaders seize goods, people, and power, and among the captives is Lot, Abram's nephew. When Abram hears of it, he doesn't hesitate. He gathers a band of trained men from his own household, just over 300, and sets out in pursuit. By nightfall, they strike. The ambush is swift, tactical, and decisive. Lot is rescued, the goods recovered, and the armies scattered. On his return, he is met by a mysterious figure, Melchizedek, king of Salem and priest of God Most High. This priest brings out bread and wine and blesses Abram in God's name. In return, Abram gives him 1/10 of everything. But the king of Sodom also approaches. He offers Abram all the recovered goods, a reward for the rescue. Abram refuses. He will not take a thread or sandal strap, lest anyone say the king of Sodom made Abram rich. His oath is to God alone, and that's where his trust remains. This moment, wedged between battle and blessing, reveals more than strategy or strength. It shows the kind of man Abram is becoming, loyal, restrained, and committed to something higher than mere gain. He does not seek glory. He does not exploit his victory. He walks with reverence, even in triumph. The night is still. Abram stands beneath a sky crowded with stars, the cool air pressing against his skin, but the quiet cannot ease his thoughts. He is wealthy, respected, protected, but still childless. The promise of descendants feels distant, almost abstract, and so he speaks, voicing his worry aloud. What good are all these blessings if he has no one to pass them to? God replies with reassurance. This man will not be your heir. Abram will have a son of his own flesh and blood. Then God brings him outside and gestures upward. Look at the sky and count the stars if you can. The heavens are scattered with light, uncountable, endless, and just like that, a quiet certainty settles in Abram's heart. He believes. That belief, simple, trusting, is counted as righteousness. But Abram still has questions. God has promised him this land, yet he owns not even a piece of it. How can he know the promise will come true? In response, God initiates something ancient, sacred, and strange. Animals are brought: cow, goat, ram, dove, pigeon. Abram prepares them as instructed, slicing some in half and laying the pieces opposite each other, forming a narrow corridor of flesh and blood. He waits, swatting away vultures that descend too soon, and as the sun sinks, a deep unnatural sleep overtakes him. In that darkness, a heaviness falls, a dread. Then God speaks. He speaks of suffering. Abram's descendants will live as strangers in a foreign land. They will be enslaved, oppressed for 400 years, but afterward they will emerge with great possessions and return here. Justice will come in its time. When night is at its blackest, a smoking firepot and a flaming torch appear. Moving on their own, they pass between the animal halves, slow and silent. Abram does not walk this path. Only God does. The covenant is not mutual. It is a promise bound by God alone. On that night, boundaries are drawn. Abram's offspring will inherit land from the river of Egypt to the great Euphrates, land occupied now by many nations, but promised nonetheless. The stars remain above, quiet and shining, and Abram, though still without a child, begins to believe. Time passes, and the silence grows heavy. Abram and Sarai have heard the promises, but the years stretch long with no sign of a child. Sarai feels the weight of barrenness pressing deeper into her bones. She is tired of waiting, of hoping, of watching seasons change without change of her own. So she speaks. "Take my servant, Hagar. Perhaps I can build a family through her." It's not rebellion, it's desperation, tangled with duty. This was not uncommon in their world, but still, it's not what had been promised. Abram agrees. Hagar, the Egyptian servant, becomes a surrogate for hope, and when she conceives, everything changes. The household balance shifts. Hagar begins to look at Sarai differently, no longer merely a servant, but the woman carrying Abram's child. Sarai feels it. A sharpness, a fracture. She blames Abram. "May the wrong done to me be on you," she says. He places the decision back in her hands. "She is your servant. Do with her as you see fit." And Sarai deals harshly with her. We don't know the details, but it is enough to drive Hagar away. She flees into the wilderness. There, by a spring on the way to Shur, the angel of the Lord finds her. This is the first time in Scripture an angel is mentioned by name, and the first time God addresses someone so low in status, an enslaved pregnant woman, alone. He speaks gently. "Where have you come from, and where are you going?" She answers honestly. She's running from Sarai. Then comes the call: return, submit. Hard words, but they come with a promise. She will have a son. He will be named Ishmael. God hears, for the Lord has heard her affliction. The angel's words are both blessing and prophecy. Her son will be strong and wild, living in tension with those around him. A free spirit born of a fractured home. Hagar gives a name to God, the only woman in Scripture to do so. She calls him El Roi, the God who sees me, and the spring where she stood becomes known as Bir Lahai Roi, the well of the living one who sees me. She returns, Ishmael is born, and the house of Abram holds its breath. Abram is 99 years old when God appears to him once more. This time the encounter is weighty and transformative. God begins with a declaration: "I am God Almighty. Walk before me and be blameless." Then comes the promise, renewed and expanded. Abram will be the father of many nations, and kings will come from his line. But it's more than a promise. It's a covenant, a binding sacred agreement. And to mark it, God changes Abram's name. No longer exalted father, he will now be called Abraham, father of multitudes. The new name reflects a future, not yet visible, but guaranteed by divine word. God also changes Sarai's name. She will be Sarah, and she too will bear a son. Abraham falls on his face in awe, but also laughs. How could a child be born to a man nearly 100, and a woman nearing 90? He suggests Ishmael might be the one to carry the legacy. But God is clear. Sarah herself will have a son, and his name will be Isaac. Ishmael will be blessed too, made into a great nation, but the covenant will pass through Isaac. Then, another sign of the covenant is introduced: circumcision. Every male in Abraham's household, whether born to him or acquired as a servant, is to bear this mark. It will be the outward sign of an inward promise, a physical token carried in flesh, passed from generation to generation. Abraham does not hesitate. That very day he follows through, on himself, on Ishmael, and on every man in his care, just as God commanded. The moment is both solemn and bold. A new identity, a new sign, a new chapter. What was once a distant promise is now etched into the daily life of Abraham's household. Faith is no longer just belief, it is obedience, devotion, and legacy. The heat of the day settles over the land when Abraham looks up from the shade of his tent. 3 men stand nearby. He runs to greet them, offering water, rest, and food beneath the trees. He does not know, or perhaps he suspects, that one of them speaks with divine authority. They accept his hospitality, and Sarah prepares bread while Abraham selects a tender calf for the meal. After they eat, one of the visitors asks where Sarah is. "In the tent," Abraham replies. The visitor promises, "By this time next year, Sarah will have a son." Inside, Sarah laughs silently. She is old. Her body is long past such hopes. But the Lord hears her laugh and asks, "Why did Sarah laugh?" She denies it, afraid. "You did laugh," comes the reply. The men rise and walk towards Sodom, and Abraham walks with them. What follows is not a private thought, but a divine question spoken aloud. Shall I hide from Abraham what I am about to do? For Abraham will become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth will be blessed through him. So the Lord tells Abraham, Sodom and Gomorrah's sin is grievous. Their outcry has risen to heaven, and he will go down to see if the evil is as complete as reported. As the 2 angels continue on, Abraham remains and speaks to the Lord. What begins as a question becomes a negotiation. Will you sweep away the righteous with the wicked? What if there are 50 righteous in the city? 40? 30? With each request, the answer remains the same. If 10 righteous are found, the city will be spared. The Lord departs, and Abraham returns to his tent. Evening falls as the 2 angels reach Sodom. At the gate, Lot sees them and bows low, urging them to stay at his home for the night. At first they decline, but he insists, and they follow him to his house, where he prepares a meal. Before they lie down, men from the city surround the house, young and old alike. They call out to Lot, demanding he bring out the visitors so they can abuse them. Lot steps outside, closing the door behind him. He pleads with them to do no such wickedness. In desperation, he even offers his daughters instead, an act that speaks to the desperation of the moment, though it too reveals troubling layers of this world's brokenness. The crowd grows aggressive. They accuse Lot of acting superior, a foreigner trying to judge them. As they press in, the angels pull Lot back inside and strike the men outside with blindness, so they cannot find the door. The angels warn Lot, "Take your family and flee. Judgment is coming." He tries to convince his sons-in-law, but they think he's joking. At dawn, the angels urge him again, still hesitant. Lot lingers until the angel sees him, his wife, and his 2 daughters by the hand and lead them out. Once outside the city, the angels tell them to run and not look back. Lot pleads to escape to a small town called Zoar. Permission is granted. Then, as the sun rises over the land, fire and sulfur rain down from heaven, destroying Sodom, Gomorrah, and all the valley. Lot's wife looks back toward the city, and the text says simply, "She became a pillar of salt." Just one line, no elaboration, no explanation. A brief moment with lasting weight. Some say it was disobedience, others, a final glance of longing. Whatever the reason, she is gone, and the story moves on without her. Lot settles in Zoar, but fear drives him to the mountains. He lives in a cave with his daughters. Believing there are no men left to carry on the family line, the daughters conspire to have children by their father. On 2 consecutive nights, they make their father drink wine and lie with him without his knowledge. Both of the 2 daughters conceive. The sons born from this are named Moab and Ben-Ammi, the ancestors of the Moabites and Ammonites. An eventful chapter ends in silence. The valley behind them turned to ash, its chaos fading into dust, and memory. Abraham moves again, this time settling in the region of Gerar. There he tells people that Sarah is his sister. Once again a king, this time Abimelech, takes her into his household, unaware of the full truth. But God intervenes, coming to Abimelech in a dream. "You are as good as dead," God says, "for the woman you have taken is married." Abimelech protests. He hasn't touched her, and he acted innocently. God acknowledges this, saying it was he who kept Abimelech from sinning. Still, the command is clear: return Sarah and have Abraham pray for you. Abimelech rises early, distressed, and tells his officials everything. He then summons Abraham and demands an explanation. Abraham admits he feared for his life and assumed there was no fear of God in the land. He also explains that Sarah truly is his half-sister, sharing the same father, though not the same mother, and became his wife. Abimelech gives Abraham sheep, cattle, and servants, and returns Sarah to him. He also grants them permission to live anywhere in the land and offers Abraham 1,000 shekels of silver as a public vindication of Sarah's honor. Then Abraham prays to God, and Abimelech's household is healed. For during the time Sarah was in his house, God had closed the wombs of all the women, a sign of his displeasure. Now, that judgment is lifted. The story serves as a strange echo of Abraham's earlier failure in Egypt. Yet it also shows God's hand working, even through flawed choices. The promise to Sarah still stands, untouched, and the path forward begins to narrow toward its long-awaited fulfillment. At long last, the Lord fulfills his promise. Sarah gives birth to a son, and Abraham names him Isaac, meaning he laughs. It's a name that recalls their astonishment, their disbelief, and now their joy. Abraham is 100 years old when Isaac is born. Sarah's laughter is different now. She says, "God has brought me laughter, and everyone who hears about this will laugh with me." The child is weaned, and Abraham holds a great feast to mark the occasion. But trouble stirs. Sarah sees Ishmael, the son of Hagar, mocking or playing with Isaac. She becomes protective and demands that Abraham send Hagar and her son away. "That slave woman's son will never share in the inheritance with my son Isaac," she says. Abraham is distressed. This is still his child, but God tells him to listen to Sarah. Isaac is the child of the promise, yet God assures Abraham that Ishmael too will become a nation. So Abraham sends them off. Hagar wanders in the desert of Beersheba with her son. When the water runs out, she places Ishmael under a bush and walks away, unable to watch him die. But God hears the boy's cries. An angel calls to Hagar and tells her not to be afraid. Then God opens her eyes, and she sees a well. She fills her skin with water, and they survive. Ishmael grows up in the desert, becomes an archer, and lives in the region of Paran. His mother finds him a wife from Egypt. Later, Abimelech comes to Abraham, recognizing that God is with him in all he does. He proposes a treaty of peace, and Abraham agrees. But first there is a dispute over a well that Abimelech's servants had seized. Abraham brings it up, and they reach a resolution. Abraham offers sheep and cattle, and sets aside 7 ewe lambs as a witness that he dug the well. They name the place Beersheba, well of the oath. Abimelech returns home, and Abraham plants a tamarisk tree, calling on the name of the Lord, the eternal God. He stays in the land of the Philistines for a long time. The promised son now lives, and the covenant moves quietly forward. In this chapter, God tests Abraham's faith. The command comes suddenly: "Take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on a mountain I will show you." Abraham does not argue. He rises early, saddles his donkey, splits wood, and sets out with Isaac and 2 servants. The journey takes 3 days. On the third, Abraham lifts his eyes and sees the place in the distance. He tells the servants to stay behind. "The boy and I will go worship, and we will return." Isaac carries the wood. Abraham carries the fire and the knife. As they climb, Isaac speaks, "Father, where is the lamb for the offering?" Abraham answers, "God will provide the lamb." At the top, Abraham builds the altar. He lays out the wood. Then he binds Isaac, his son, and places him on the altar. He reaches for the knife. But a voice stops him. The angel of the Lord calls from heaven, "Abraham, Abraham, do not lay a hand on the boy. Now I know that you fear God. You have not withheld your son." Abraham looks up and sees a ram, caught by its horns in a thicket. He offers the ram instead. He names the place the Lord will provide, and to this day it is said, "On the mountain of the Lord it will be provided." The angel calls again, reaffirming the covenant. Because Abraham obeyed, God swears by himself that his offspring will be as countless as the stars and the sand. They will possess the gates of their enemies, and through them all nations will be blessed. Abraham and Isaac descend the mountain together. The test is over. But something has shifted. God has not only affirmed his promise, he has revealed something deeper, that trust and obedience, even in the face of the impossible, open the way to blessing. Sarah dies at Kirioth Arba, today known as Hebron. She lived 127 years. Abraham mourns beside her, weeping. When his grief settles, he rises. He is still a foreigner in the land, a sojourner. He owns no ground to call his own, and now he needs a place to bury his wife. He approaches the Hittites, the people of the land, and bows before them. "Let me buy a burial site among you," he says, "so I can bury my dead." They answer with honor, "You are a prince of God among us. Take the finest of our tombs." But Abraham insists. "If you are willing," he says, "ask Ephron, son of Zohar, to sell me the cave of Machpelah at the end of his field. I will pay full price." Ephron, who is sitting nearby, responds in kind. "The field and the cave are yours. I give them to you freely." Still, Abraham bows and replies, "Let me pay what it's worth." So Ephron names a price, 400 shekels of silver, a generous sum. Abraham weighs it out on the spot, and the deal is sealed. From that day, the field of Machpelah near Mamre becomes Abraham's possession, along with its cave and the surrounding trees. It is the first permanent foothold in the land God has promised. An act of honor, sealed in silver and sorrow. There, in that cave, Abraham lays Sarah to rest. In a land not yet theirs, the tomb becomes an anchor, a place of memory, a beginning of belonging. Abraham was old. His hair had gone white, his steps had slowed, and Sarah was gone. But the promises still stood, promises of descendants, of a great nation, of blessing that would stretch far beyond his lifetime. And yet, Isaac was alone, not yet married. The thread of the promise was thin, if it did not continue through him. So Abraham called for his most trusted servant, likely Eliezer, who had served him faithfully for decades, and gave him a solemn charge. He must find a wife for Isaac. Not from the women of Canaan, among whom they lived, but from Abraham's own kin, in the land he once called home. The servant placed his hand under Abraham's thigh, swearing an oath of loyalty and obedience. But he hesitated. "What if she won't come?" he asked. "Shall I take Isaac to her land instead?" "No," Abraham said firmly. "God brought me out of that place. Isaac must not return there. If the woman will not come, then you are released from this oath. But promise me, you will not take my son back." So the servant departed, taking 10 camels, gifts of gold and silver, and a heart full of careful hope. He travelled north, following the old trade routes to the city of Nahor, where Abraham's family still lived. As evening fell, he arrived outside the town and stopped beside a well, the place where women came to draw water at day's end. There he prayed, not for a miracle, not for a sign written in the heavens, but for something subtle and sincere. "Let the young woman who offers me water and also offers water to my camels be the one." And before he had even finished speaking, Rebekah came. She was striking, poised and beautiful, but more than that, she was kind and strong. Without hesitation, she offered him water, then hurried to draw more for the camels, again and again, until the troughs were full. The servant watched her silently, astonished. This was exactly what he had asked for, down to every last detail. When she finished, he approached. He gave her gold jewelry, bracelets, and a nose ring, and asked whose daughter she was. "I am the daughter of Bethuel, son of Milcah, whom she bore to Nahor," she said, "Abraham's kin." The servant bowed low, giving thanks on the spot, praising the God of his master. Rebekah, wide-eyed but smiling, ran home to tell her family what had happened. Her brother Laban came out to meet the stranger. When he saw the jewelry and heard Rebekah's account, he welcomed the servant into their home, offered water for the camels, food for the men, and a place to rest, but the servant would not eat until he spoke. He told them everything, from Abraham's commission to the prayer at the well, from Rebekah's kindness to the confirmation he saw in her words, and then he asked plainly, would they let her go? Laban and Bethuel listened, and in the flow of the story, they saw more than coincidence. This is from the Lord, they said. We cannot speak against it. They agreed, but the next morning the mood shifted. Laban and her mother asked for a delay, 10 days perhaps, time to prepare, time to say goodbye. But the servant urged them not to linger. Do not hold me back, since the Lord has prospered my journey, he said. So they called Rebekah and asked her directly, will you go with this man? And she said yes. They blessed her with words passed down through generations. May you become thousands upon thousands. May your descendants possess the gates of their enemies. And so Rebekah departed with her nurse, her maids and the servant who had prayed at the well. South they went, down through the hills, across open plains toward a future she had only imagined. In the Negev, Isaac walked alone at dusk. The day was cooling, and the sky was turning rose and gold. He lifted his eyes, and far off, he saw the camels. Rebekah saw him too, and asked, who is that man, walking in the field to meet us? It is my master, the servant replied. So she took her veil and covered herself. The servant told Isaac everything, every prayer, every sign, every kindness. And Isaac brought Rebekah into his mother Sarah's tent. There he took her as his wife, and in her presence he found comfort for the first time since his mother had died. Abraham takes another wife, Keturah, and through her he has several more sons, but even as his family grows, the covenant remains centered on Isaac. Before Abraham's death, he gives gifts to his other children and sends them eastward, away from Isaac's inheritance. Then, at the age of 175, Abraham dies. He is buried by Isaac and Ishmael, beside Sarah, in the cave of Machpelah. The text briefly recounts the generations of Ishmael, 12 sons who become 12 tribal rulers. Their line, though not central to the covenant, grows strong and expansive. But the narrative soon returns to Isaac. Isaac and Rebekah wait many years for children, and when Rebekah finally conceives, she feels a struggle within her womb. She prays, and God answers. 2 nations are inside her. One will be stronger, and the older will serve the younger. She gives birth to twins. The first is red and hairy, so they name him Esau. The second emerges gripping his brother's heel, and they call him Jacob. As they grow, the brothers diverge. Esau becomes a hunter, a man of the field. Jacob is quiet, dwelling among tents. Their parents divide in affection. Isaac favors Esau, and Rebekah prefers Jacob. One day, Esau returns famished from the hunt, and begs Jacob for some stew. Jacob agrees on the condition that Esau sells him his birthright. Esau, exhausted and careless, swears an oath and trades away his inheritance for a bowl of lentils. It's a small exchange, spoken in haste, but it signals the beginning of a shift, an upending of tradition that will ripple through generations. Famine strikes the land again, echoing the hardship once faced by Abraham. Isaac considers going down to Egypt, but God appears and tells him to stay in the land of Gerar. There, God reaffirms the covenant. Isaac will inherit the promises given to Abraham. His descendants will be many, and through them all nations will be blessed. Settling in Gerar, Isaac fears for his life because of Rebekah's beauty. Just as his father once did, he says she is his sister, but Abimelech, the king, eventually sees them together and realizes the truth. Rather than punish Isaac, he commands his people to protect them. God blesses Isaac abundantly. His crops yield 100-fold, and he becomes wealthy, gaining flocks, herds, and servants. The Philistines grow jealous and stop up the wells Abraham had dug. Abimelech asks Isaac to leave, and Isaac moves to the valley of Gerar, reopening the old wells and digging new ones. Each time he digs, there is conflict, until finally, one well is left uncontested. Isaac names it Rehoboth, saying, "Now the Lord has given us room, and we will flourish in the land. God appears to Isaac again in Beersheba, renewing his promise. Isaac builds an altar, pitches his tent, and digs another well. Even Abimelech returns, not in anger, but in peace. He sees that God is with Isaac, and they make a treaty together. Meanwhile, Esau takes 2 wives from the Hittite nation. The decision grieves Isaac and Rebekah, and casts a shadow over what lies ahead. Isaac has grown old, and his eyes are dim. He calls Esau his firstborn, and asks him to hunt and prepare a meal so he can bless him before death. Rebekah overhears. She remembers God's word, that the older will serve the younger, and acts swiftly. While Esau is in the field, she tells Jacob to bring 2 goats. She will prepare them just as Isaac likes. Then Jacob will go to his father, pretending to be Esau. Jacob hesitates. Esau is hairy, and he is not. If Isaac touches him, the trick will be exposed. Rebekah takes Esau's best clothes and covers Jacob's hands and neck with goat skins. The meal is prepared. Jacob enters his father's tent, voice trembling. Isaac is unsure. It sounds like Jacob, but the hands feel like Esau's. He eats the food, smells Esau's clothes, and gives the blessing: abundance, rule over nations, and dominion over his brother. No sooner does Jacob leave than Esau returns. He prepares a meal, enters the tent, and speaks. Isaac trembles violently. The blessing is already gone. Esau cries out, pleading for something, anything, but Isaac cannot undo what's done. He gives Esau a lesser blessing, one of struggle, of dwelling away from richness, of eventual freedom. Esau burns with hatred. He plans to kill Jacob once Isaac has died. Rebekah hears and urges Jacob to flee to her brother Laban in Haran. She convinces Isaac to send Jacob away, saying she does not want him to marry a Hittite woman. Isaac agrees and blesses Jacob again, this time knowingly, sending him off with the covenant of Abraham. Esau, seeing that his marriages displease his parents, adds another wife, this one a daughter of Ishmael, though it brings no healing. The family is splintered, the birthright is gone, and Jacob, once home in the tents, now walks alone into a distant land. Jacob departs from Beersheba and sets out toward Haran, alone and uncertain. As night falls, he finds a place to rest. With a stone for a pillow, he lies under the open sky, and there, in his sleep, he dreams. A stairway rises from the earth to the heavens, and angels ascend and descend its steps. Above it stands the Lord. God speaks, not with rebuke, but with promise. The covenant once given to Abraham and Isaac is now passed to Jacob. This land will be his. His descendants will spread in every direction, like dust on the wind. All nations will be blessed through them, and Jacob will not walk alone. God vows to be with him, to guard him, and to bring him back to this land. Jacob wakes with awe. Surely the Lord is in this place, he whispers, and I did not know it. The ordinary ground has become sacred. He takes the stone he used as a pillow, sets it upright, and pours oil on it as a marker. He names the place Bethel, house of God. With a trembling heart, Jacob makes a vow. If God will protect him on this journey, if he returns safely, then the Lord will be his God, and of all he is given, he will return a tenth. There is no great monument here, no crowd to witness the moment, just one man, a stone, and the hush of night. But heaven touched earth, and a promise was sealed. Jacob, once a deceiver, now begins a journey of transformation. The God of his father has spoken to him directly, and though the road ahead remains long and tangled, something has shifted. The wandering has purpose now. Jacob continues his journey and arrives in the land of the eastern peoples. Near a well, he meets shepherds resting with their flocks. The stone over the well is large, and the men wait until all the herds are gathered before rolling it away to water the sheep. As Jacob speaks with them, Rachel arrives, Laban's daughter, tending her father's flock. Moved by her arrival, Jacob steps forward and rolls the heavy stone from the well himself. He waters the sheep, then kisses Rachel and weeps. She runs to tell her father, and Laban welcomes Jacob into his home. Jacob stays and works for a month, and Laban offers to pay him. Jacob has a request. He will work 7 years in exchange for Rachel's hand in marriage. The years pass quickly, so great is his love for her. But on the wedding night, Laban deceives him, giving him Leah, the older daughter, instead. Jacob does not realize until morning. Confronting Laban, Jacob is told that in this land, the older must marry before the younger. If Jacob agrees to complete Leah's bridal week, he may marry Rachel too, so long as he works another 7 years. So he does. Leah is unloved, but God sees her sorrow. He opens her womb, while Rachel remains barren. Leah bears 4 sons, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and finally Judah. Each name is a cry from her heart, hoping for love, aching for worth, clinging to hope. This chapter is filled with longing and labor, with love twisted by deceit. Jacob, once the trickster, has now been tricked. His path to family is not clean or fair, but through it, a lineage begins to grow. From Rachel and Leah, 2 sisters bound by rivalry, come the roots of a nation. And from Judah, Leah's 4th son, will one day come a king. Rachel watched her sister cradle yet another newborn. Leah, unloved but fertile, now had 4 sons, and Rachel had none. The ache grew sharper. She turned to Jacob, desperate. "Give me children, or I'll die." Jacob, worn thin, snapped, "Am I in the place of God, who has withheld children from you?" So Rachel made a choice rooted in old custom and quiet anguish. She gave Jacob her servant, Bilhah. "Sleep with her," she said. "Perhaps through her I can build a family." Bilhah bore a son, and Rachel named him Dan. "God has judged me." Then came a second, and she named him Naphtali. "I have wrestled with my sister and prevailed." But Leah saw what was happening and responded in kind. She gave Jacob her servant Zilpah. A son came, Gad, then another, Asher. 4 wives now, all competing for affection, status, blessing. One day, Leah's eldest found mandrakes in the field, plants thought to aid fertility. Rachel asked for them. Leah snapped, "Isn't it enough you stole my husband? Now you want my son's mandrakes too?" Rachel replied, "Jacob can sleep with you tonight, if I can have them." That night, Leah went out to meet Jacob. "You must come with me," she said. "I've hired you with my son's mandrakes." She conceived again, a 5th son, Issachar, then a 6th, Zebulun, then a daughter, Dinah, and finally, at long last, God remembered Rachel. He listened to her cry and opened her womb. She gave birth to a son and named him Joseph, saying, "May the Lord add to me another." Years passed. Jacob was ready to return home. He said to Laban, "Give me my wives and children, and let me go. I've served you well." But Laban knew he'd grown rich under Jacob's hand. "Name your wages," he said. Jacob proposed a deal. "Let me take every speckled or spotted animal from your flocks. That will be my pay." Laban agreed, then immediately removed every such animal and gave them to his sons, putting distance between them and Jacob. Still, Jacob tended the remaining flocks, and through clever breeding and shrewd care, he built up his own herds. Over time, his flocks grew strong and numerous. He began to prosper through persistence and sharp observation. Jacob now had children, wives, and wealth. But envy simmered. Laban's sons grumbled. "Jacob has taken everything that was our father's." Tensions rose. Jacob could feel it in the air, the mood shifting, the hospitality waning, and he knew the time to leave was drawing near. Tensions with Laban had been building for years. Now, Jacob saw the way Laban looked at him had changed. Then God spoke, "Return to the land of your fathers, and I will be with you." Jacob called Rachel and Leah to the field and explained everything, the broken agreements, the shifting wages, the quiet blessing of God. They agreed to leave. "What inheritance do we have here?" they asked. "Do whatever God has told you." So Jacob gathered his family and his flocks and left without telling Laban. But Rachel secretly took her father's household idols. 3 days later, Laban realized they were gone and chased them down. God warned him in a dream, "Be careful what you say to Jacob." When he caught up, Laban accused Jacob of deception and of stealing the idols. Jacob denied it, unaware that Rachel had hidden them beneath her saddle. Laban searched every tent, but found nothing. Frustrated, Jacob finally spoke his mind. He told Laban everything, the years of service, the constant mistreatment, and how God had protected him throughout. In the end, the two men made a covenant. They set up a heap of stones as a witness, shared a meal, and went their separate ways. Laban kissed his daughters and grandchildren goodbye. Jacob turned toward Canaan, carrying the weight of a long exile and the promise of home ahead. As Jacob continues his journey, he is met by angels of God. Seeing them, he names the place Mahanaim, 2 camps. But there is no time to linger. Esau is near, and Jacob is afraid. He sends messengers ahead with a message of humility. Your servant Jacob sends this to his lord Esau. I have oxen, donkeys, flocks and servants. I hope to find favor in your eyes. The messengers return with troubling news. Esau is coming, with 400 men. Fear grips Jacob. He splits his people and possessions into 2 camps, thinking, if one is attacked, the other may escape. Then he prays, O God of my father Abraham and Isaac, you told me to return, and I trust you. I am unworthy of all your kindness. Deliver me, I pray, from my brother Esau. Jacob prepares gifts for Esau: goats, sheep, camels, cattle, donkeys, all sent ahead in waves. When my brother meets you, he tells each servant, say, these belong to your servant Jacob. He is behind us. Maybe, Jacob hopes this offering will soften Esau's heart. That night, Jacob sends his family and belongings across the stream. Then he remains alone, and there, in the dark, a man wrestles with him until daybreak. Neither yields. When the man sees he cannot overpower Jacob, he touches his hip, dislocating it. Yet Jacob clings to him, saying, I will not let you go unless you bless me. The man asks, What is your name? Jacob, he replies. Your name will no longer be Jacob, the man says, but Israel, for you have struggled with God and with men, and have prevailed. Jacob asks the man's name, but receives no answer. Instead, the man blesses him and departs. Jacob names the place Peniel, face of God, saying, I saw God face to face, and my life was spared. The sun rises as Jacob limps away, wounded yet transformed. The moment Jacob had dreaded finally came. As he looked up, he saw Esau approaching, and with him 400 men. Jacob moved quickly. He arranged his family in careful order, the maidservants and their children in front, Leah and her children next, and Rachel and Joseph in the rear. Then Jacob went ahead alone. As he approached his brother, he bowed to the ground 7 times, slowly, humbly, step by step. But Esau ran to meet him. He embraced him, fell on his neck, and wept. No bitterness, no revenge, only joy at seeing his brother again. Jacob was overwhelmed. When Esau asked about the women and children, Jacob introduced each group in turn, all bowed respectfully before him. Then Esau asked about the gifts Jacob had sent ahead. Jacob insisted they were meant as a peace offering. Esau declined, but Jacob urged him to accept. Seeing your face is like seeing the face of God, Jacob said, now that you have received me with such kindness, and so Esau accepted the gift. Esau offered to travel alongside Jacob, or at least leave men with him for protection, but Jacob declined gently. His flocks and children couldn't keep up, and he didn't want to push them too hard. Let me go at my own pace, he said. So Esau returned to Seir, and Jacob travelled slowly towards Succoth, where he built shelters for his family and livestock. Eventually, he arrived safely at Shechem in the land of Canaan and set up camp near the city. There he bought a plot of land and pitched his tent, and he built an altar, calling it Eli Israel, God, the God of Israel. In Shechem, Jacob's daughter Dinah went out to see the women of the land. But the prince of the region, also named Shechem, saw her, took her, and lay with her by force. Then he claimed to love her and asked his father Hamor to arrange a marriage. Jacob heard of it, but remained silent until his sons returned from the fields. When they did, Hamor and Shechem came to negotiate, offering alliances and trade in exchange for the marriage. The sons of Jacob, furious over their sister's violation, answered deceitfully. They said they would agree if every male in the city was circumcised. Hamor and Shechem accepted the terms and convinced their people to comply. But 3 days later, When the men were in pain, Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brothers, took up swords. They killed every male, including Shechem and Hamor, and rescued Dinah from the house. Jacob rebuked them for the danger they had brought. "You've made us a stench," he said. "We are few. If they gather against us, we will be destroyed." But his sons answered, "Should he treat our sister like a prostitute?" The story ended not with resolution, but with tension between justice, vengeance, and survival. God spoke to Jacob again. "Go up to Bethel and settle there. Build an altar to the God who appeared to you when you fled from your brother Esau." Jacob gathered his household and told them to discard their foreign gods and purify themselves. They gave him all the idols and earrings they had, and he buried them beneath an oak tree near Shechem. Then they journeyed to Bethel, and the fear of God fell upon the cities around them. No one pursued them. At Bethel, Jacob built the altar and called the place El Bethel, God of Bethel. There, God appeared again and blessed him, renewing the name Israel. "A nation and a company of nations shall come from you," God said, "and kings shall be among your descendants." As they neared Ephrath, Rachel went into labor. It was hard labor, and she struggled. The midwife tried to comfort her, saying, "Don't be afraid, you have a son," but Rachel's strength was fading. With her final breath, she named him Ben-Oni, son of my sorrow. Jacob, grief-stricken, called him Benjamin, son of the right hand. Rachel died there on the road. Jacob buried her near Ephrath and set up a pillar over her grave. Soon after, Reuben, Jacob's firstborn, lay with Bilhah, his father's concubine. Jacob heard of it, but said nothing. Finally, Jacob returned to his father Isaac in Mamre. Isaac lived to be 180 years old. When he died, Esau and Jacob buried him together. This chapter recounts the generations of Esau, who is also called Edom. Esau took his wives from among the Canaanites, Adah, Oholibamah, and Basemath, and they bore him sons. Over time, Esau moved his family, possessions, and livestock away from his brother Jacob, settling in the hill country of Seir, because the land could not support both brothers with all their herds. Esau's descendants became the chiefs of Edom. The chapter lists their names, lineages, and the territories they ruled. These include the sons of Esau and their tribal chiefs, along with the kings who reigned in Edom before any king reigned over Israel. From Seir's original inhabitants, the Horites, to the rulers who later emerged from Esau's line, the record details a succession of names and clans, cementing Edom's identity as a distinct people and nation. Though the focus of Genesis will shift away from Esau, this chapter preserves his legacy in full. Joseph is 17. He walks the pastures of Canaan, tending flocks with his brothers, the sons of Jacob, now called Israel. But Joseph is set apart. Israel loves him more than any of the others, for he is the son of his old age, born to him by Rachel. He makes Joseph a special robe, long, flowing, richly colored, a garment not for labor, but for favor. The robe does not go unnoticed. His brothers see it and are filled with envy. But Joseph adds fuel to their resentment with dreams, bold, prophetic visions he shares without hesitation. In one, they are binding sheaves in a field, when suddenly his sheaf rises and stands upright, and their sheaves gather around and bow to it. His brothers ask, "Do you intend to reign over us?" They hate him all the more. Then another dream. The sun, the moon, and 11 stars bow before him. He tells his father and brothers alike. Even Israel rebukes him. "Shall your mother and I and your brothers indeed come to bow down to you?" But he keeps the matter in mind. One day, Israel sends Joseph to check on his brothers as they pasture the flocks near Shechem. Joseph obeys, wandering the countryside in search of them, until a stranger points him toward Dothan. There, from a distance, his brothers see him approaching, and they conspire. "Here comes the dreamer," they say. "Let's kill him, throw him into a pit, and say a wild animal devoured him. Then we'll see what becomes of his dreams." Reuben intervenes. He urges them not to kill him, but to throw him alive into a cistern, planning in secret to rescue Joseph later, so they strip off his robe and cast him into a dry pit. As they sit to eat, a caravan approaches. Ishmaelites from Gilead, on their way to Egypt with spices and goods. Judah speaks up. "What profit is there in killing our brother? Let's sell him." The others agree. They lift Joseph from the pit and sell him for 20 pieces of silver. He is bound and led away. When Reuben returns and finds the pit empty, he tears his clothes in anguish. They take Joseph's robe, dip it in goat's blood, and bring it to their father. "We found this," they say. "Examine it. Is it your son's?" Israel recognizes it and weeps. "It is my son's robe. A wild animal has devoured him." He mourns for days, refusing comfort, saying, "I will go down to the grave in sorrow." In Egypt, Joseph is sold to Potiphar, a captain of Pharaoh's guard. A new chapter begins, far from home, in a world of palaces, power, and watchful eyes. Amid the unfolding story of Joseph, the focus shifts, suddenly and strikingly, to Judah. Judah left his brothers and went to live near Adullam, staying with a local man for a time. He marries a Canaanite woman, and together they have 3 sons, Onan, and Shelah. When comes of age, Judah finds him a wife named Tamar, but is wicked in the sight of the Lord, and he dies, leaving Tamar a widow. According to custom, Onan is to marry her and raise up offspring for his brother, but Onan resists. He uses her without honor, ensuring no child will be born. The Lord sees his cruelty, and Onan too is struck down. Judah fears his youngest son might also die, so he sends Tamar away, asking her to remain a widow in her father's house until Shelah grows up. But time passes, and Judah does not keep his word. Later, Judah's own wife dies. After his mourning, he travels to Timnah for sheep shearing. Tamar hears of this. She knows Shelah is grown, and yet still withheld. She removes her widow's clothes and veils herself, waiting by the roadside where she knows Judah will pass. He sees her, but does not recognize her. Thinking her a prostitute, he approaches. She asks for a pledge: his seal, cord, and staff. He agrees to her terms and soon lies with her. She conceives, but keeps her identity hidden. Later, Judah sends a friend with payment, but the woman is gone. When asked, the locals deny any prostitute was there. Judah lets it go, unwilling to make a scene. 3 months pass. Word reaches Judah. Tamar is pregnant. Furious, he demands she be burned. But she sends a message. She is pregnant by the man who owns this seal, this cord, this staff. Judah sees them and understands. She is more righteous than I, he says, since I did not give her to my son Shelah. He never touches her again. In time, she gives birth to twins. During labor, one child extends a hand, and the midwife ties a scarlet thread around it. But then he draws back, and his brother is born first. They are named Perez and Zerah. And so, through this strange and scandalous path, the line of Judah continues, not through wealth or status, but through a woman wronged who refused to be forgotten. The story now switches back to Joseph. He was taken down to Egypt, sold to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh and captain of the guard. In this foreign land, Joseph's fortunes shifted once again. Though a slave, he found favor. Potiphar recognized his capability and placed him in charge of his entire household. The Lord was with Joseph, and everything he touched prospered. For a time, life stabilized. Joseph oversaw fields and storehouses, harvests and accounts. The house ran smoothly, and Potiphar entrusted him without reservation. But then came a new trial, one born not of betrayal or famine, but desire. Potiphar's wife watched Joseph with increasing interest. Day after day, she tried to entice him, but Joseph refused. He would not betray the man who had trusted him, nor sin against his God. Still, she persisted, and when he fled from her advances, leaving his cloak behind, she turned the story against him. With the cloak in her hands, she cried out. She told the household Joseph had attacked her. When Potiphar returned, her tale was ready. And though the full truth may have been unclear, Joseph was thrown into prison. Even in chains, the Lord remained with him. In the darkness of the prison, Joseph rose again. The warden soon noticed his character and placed him in charge of the other prisoners. Whatever was done there, Joseph was involved. He had lost his freedom, his title, his position, again, but not his purpose. In silence and shadow, Joseph continued to serve, and the Lord continued to bless the work of his hands. Sometime later, two of Pharaoh's officials, the cupbearer and the baker, were thrown into prison, accused of offending their king. They were placed under Joseph's care, and in time, both men had troubling dreams on the same night. When Joseph noticed their sadness the next morning, he asked why they looked so downcast. "We both had dreams," they said, "but there is no one to interpret them." Joseph answered, "Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dreams." The cupbearer went first. He dreamed of a vine with 3 branches, blossoming quickly and producing grapes. He took the grapes, pressed them into Pharaoh's cup, and placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand. Joseph explained, "The 3 branches are 3 days. In 3 days Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your position. When this happens, remember me, mention me to Pharaoh, and help me get out of this place." The baker, encouraged by the good interpretation, shared his dream. He saw 3 baskets of bread on his head, and birds were eating from the top basket. Joseph replied carefully, "The 3 baskets are 3 days. In 3 days, Pharaoh will lift off your head and hang you on a tree, and the birds will eat your flesh." 3 days later, it happened exactly as Joseph said. The cupbearer was restored. The baker was executed, but the cupbearer forgot Joseph. He did not speak of him to Pharaoh. Joseph remained in prison, still waiting. 2 full years pass. Joseph remains in prison, his dreams unspoken, his wisdom forgotten. But one night, Pharaoh dreams, not once, but twice. In the first dream, 7 sleek, well-fed cows rise from the Nile and graze among the reeds. Then 7 gaunt, sickly cows emerge after them and devour the healthy ones. Yet they remain just as thin and hollow as before. Pharaoh wakes, he sleeps again. The second dream unfolds. 7 full ears of grain grow on a single stalk, only to be swallowed by 7 thin, scorched ears that sprout afterward. Troubled, Pharaoh calls for every magician, every wise man of Egypt, but none can interpret the dreams. None can bring clarity to what weighs on the king's heart. That's when the chief cupbearer finally remembers. With sudden urgency, he tells Pharaoh of a young Hebrew slave in the prison, a man who interpreted dreams with uncanny accuracy. Joseph. Pharaoh summons him immediately. Joseph is shaved, cleaned, and brought before the throne. Pharaoh lays out the visions, the cows, the grain, the confusion. Joseph listens carefully, then speaks calmly, humbly. "I cannot do this," he says, "but God will give Pharaoh the answer he seeks." He explains, the dreams are one. God is revealing what he is about to do. 7 years of great abundance are coming to Egypt, followed by 7 years of severe famine that will consume all memory of the good. The repetition of the dream is confirmation. It is certain. It will soon begin. Joseph offers counsel, not just insight. "Appoint a wise and discerning man," he says. "Let him oversee the collection of grain during the plentiful years, storing food in every city. Let there be preparation, so that when the famine arrives, Egypt will not perish." Pharaoh is struck by the clarity, the composure. "Can we find anyone like this man?" he says to his court. "One in whom is the Spirit of God." He turns to Joseph. "Since God has shown you all this, there is no one as wise and discerning as you. You shall be in charge of my palace, and all my people shall submit to your word. Only with respect to the throne will I be greater than you." Joseph is lifted from prisoner to ruler in a single breath. Pharaoh gives him his signet ring, robes of fine linen, and a gold chain around his neck. He names him Zaphenath-Paneah. He gives him Asenath, the daughter of a priest, to be his wife. Joseph is 30 years old. He rides through the land in a royal chariot, second only to Pharaoh, and he gets to work. During the 7 years of abundance, he oversees the collection and storage of grain in every city, so much that it becomes immeasurable. 2 sons are born to him during this time. The first he names Manasseh, "For God has made me forget all my trouble and my father's household." The second he names Ephraim, "For God has made me fruitful in the land of my suffering." And then, the famine begins. It strikes all the lands, but in Egypt there is bread. The people cry to Pharaoh, and Pharaoh sends them to Joseph. The storehouses are opened, and grain is sold to the Egyptians. But word spreads beyond Egypt's borders. The famine touches every nation, and they begin to come, to bow low before a man they do not recognize, a ruler in a strange land with the power to give life or to withhold it. And still, Joseph remembers his dreams. Back in Canaan, the famine bites hard. Jacob hears that Egypt has grain and sends 10 of his sons, everyone but Benjamin. He cannot bear to risk the youngest. In Egypt, the brothers arrive and bow before the governor, not knowing it is Joseph, but he knows them. Their faces are older, but unmistakable. He remembers the dreams, bundles bowing down, stars and sun submitting. Now here it is, standing before him. Joseph speaks harshly. "You are spies," he says, accusing them of scouting the land's weakness. They protest. "We are 12 brothers, sons of one man. One is no more, and the youngest is with our father." Joseph presses the accusation, then sets a test. "Leave one of you here. The rest may take grain back. But if you ever return, bring your youngest brother. Then I'll know your story is true." He locks them up for 3 days. On the third, he relents, detains only one, Simeon. The others may go, but their bags will carry more than grain. Quietly, he orders their silver returned, hidden in the sacks. On the road home, one discovers the money and panics. "What is this God has done to us?" they say, fear rising. When they reach Jacob and explain, he is distraught. "You have bereaved me of my children. Joseph is gone, Simeon is gone, and now you want to take Benjamin." Reuben offers his own sons as surety. "If I don't bring him back, you may put them to death." But Jacob refuses. "My son shall not go with you. If harm comes to him, you'll bring down my grey hairs in sorrow to the grave." He cannot bear another loss. Not after Joseph. Not after all these years. So the grain sits. Simeon waits, and Joseph, unseen, watches a reunion delayed, his heart wrestling with anger, memory, and something deeper still. The famine drags on, tightening its grip. In Canaan, Jacob's family is running out of grain again. He tells his sons to return to Egypt, but Judah reminds him of the warning: they must bring Benjamin. Without him, they will not even be allowed to speak to the governor. Jacob resists. He's already lost Joseph, and Simeon is still a prisoner. But Judah steps forward, not with excuses, but with responsibility. "Send the boy with me," he says. "I'll be the guarantee. If I don't bring him back, I will bear the blame forever." At last Jacob relents. He instructs them to carry gifts: balm, honey, spices, and double the silver, including what had mysteriously been returned in their sacks. And then he prays, "May God Almighty grant you mercy before the man." The brothers return to Egypt. When Joseph sees Benjamin with them, he tells his steward to prepare a feast. The brothers are unsettled. They fear it's a trap, that they're being lured to the house so they can be seized over the silver. At the entrance, they speak anxiously to the steward, explaining what happened. But the man reassures them, "Peace to you. Don't be afraid. Your God must have put the silver there." Then he brings out Simeon, unharmed. They're led inside, given water, and their feet are washed. Their donkeys are fed. As they wait, they prepare the gifts for Joseph's arrival. When Joseph enters, they bow low before him again. He asks about their welfare, and then carefully about their father. "Is he still alive?" he asks. "Yes," they say, "your servant, our father is well." And then he sees Benjamin, his brother, his mother's son. "Is this your youngest?" he asks, voice trembling. "God be gracious to you, my son." Overcome, Joseph rushes out of the room to weep. He hides in a private chamber and lets the emotion break free, then washes his face and returns, composed once more. The meal is served. Joseph sits separately, as do the Egyptians and his brothers. The brothers are astonished when they are seated, in order of age, from the firstborn to the youngest. How could he know? And then, a final surprise: Benjamin's portion is 5 times as much as the others. They eat and drink freely in his presence, unaware that their story is building to a reckoning just ahead. And now, the test begins. Joseph instructs his steward to fill the brothers' sacks with grain once again, and to return each man's silver at the top. But in Benjamin's sack, he hides something more: his own silver cup. The next morning, the brothers set out for Canaan. But they haven't gone far when Joseph's steward overtakes them. "Why have you repaid good with evil?" he demands. "You've stolen my master's cup." The brothers are stunned. They deny it, swearing innocence. "If any of us has it, he will die, and the rest will become your slaves." The steward agrees, though he softens the terms. "Whoever has the cup will become my slave. The rest may go free." Each sack is searched, beginning with the eldest and ending with the youngest. At last the cup is found in Benjamin's bag. Terror, grief. They tear their clothes. All of them return to the city, refusing to abandon their youngest brother. They throw themselves before Joseph once again. Judah speaks, not as the deceiver he once was, but as a changed man. He doesn't plead innocence. He only begs for mercy. He recounts everything: Jacob's fear, the pain of losing Joseph, the deep love he holds for Benjamin. "If the boy does not return, our father will die," Judah says. "Let me remain as your slave in his place. Let the boy go back with his brothers." It is a powerful reversal. Years ago, Judah sold one brother into slavery. Now he offers himself to save another. Joseph can take no more. What began as a hidden test ends with a wave of truth about to break. But not yet, not quite. Judah remains on his knees, waiting in silence. The room stills. The moment hangs in the air, trembling on the edge of revelation. But then he sees the wagons. He hears the words. And slowly, the truth takes hold. At this point, Joseph could no longer hold back. He sends all the Egyptians out of the room. Alone with his brothers, he begins to weep loudly, uncontrollably. His sobs echo through the palace. And at last he speaks. "I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?" His brothers are stunned. They cannot answer. They are terrified. But Joseph draws closer. "Come near to me," he says. And they do. "I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. But do not be distressed or angry with yourselves, for God sent me ahead of you to preserve life." He explains that there are still 5 years of famine ahead, and that God brought him to Egypt, not for punishment, but for purpose, to keep them alive. "You did not send me here. God did." He tells them to return quickly to Canaan. Bring their father, bring their families. Pharaoh will provide the best of Egypt for them, and they will live in the land of Goshen. He embraces Benjamin first, and they weep together. Then he kisses each of his brothers in turn, and the fear melts away. They talk, for the first time as brothers. When Pharaoh hears of the reunion, he is pleased. He orders wagons to be sent, and provisions for the journey. "Take your father and your households, and come to me," Pharaoh says. "I will give you the best of the land." Joseph gives his brothers gifts for the road. To Benjamin, he gives 5 times more, a sign of love, not rivalry. He sends them off with a final instruction: do not quarrel on the way. Back in Canaan, they reach Jacob and say Joseph is still alive. He is ruler over all Egypt. Jacob is stunned. He doesn't believe them until he sees the wagons. Then his spirit revives. "It is enough," he says. "My son Joseph is still alive. I will go and see him before I die." And so the family that once fractured begins to come back together. Joseph was lost, then found, dead in their minds, now alive. Israel sets out for Egypt, but not all at once. He stops in Beersheba, the place where Abraham once called on the name of the Lord. There he offers sacrifices. And in the night, God speaks. "Jacob, Jacob." "Here I am," he replies. "I am God, the God of your father. Do not be afraid to go down to Egypt, for there I will make you into a great nation. I will go with you, and I will surely bring you back again, and Joseph's hand will close your eyes." So Jacob gathers his family, sons, grandsons, daughters, and granddaughters. All his descendants travel with him. The names are listed, tribe by tribe, 70 people in all. When they arrive in Egypt, Judah goes ahead to guide them to Goshen. Joseph prepares his chariot and rides out to meet his father. When he sees him, he throws his arms around him and weeps. A long embrace, years of separation, grief, and silence collapse in a single moment. Jacob says, "Now I can die, since I have seen your face and know you are still alive." But the reunion is only the beginning. Joseph tells his family how they must present themselves to Pharaoh. When he asks what your occupation is, Say that you are shepherds, keepers of livestock, as our ancestors were. Egyptians do not like shepherds, so he will let you settle in Goshen. It is a strategic move. Goshen is fertile, yet separate. A place where they can flourish without losing their identity. A place to grow into a people. Soon, Pharaoh receives them. He listens to their story, welcomes them, and confirms Joseph's plan. They will dwell in Goshen, and he will assign men from among them to care for his own livestock. Then Joseph presents his father. Jacob stands before Pharaoh, not as a subject, but as a patriarch, and he blesses the king. "How old are you?" Pharaoh asks. Jacob answers, "The years of my pilgrimage are 130. Few and difficult have been the years of my life." He blesses Pharaoh once more and leaves his presence. And so Israel settles in the land of Egypt. In Goshen, they take root. The famine continues, but Joseph ensures they are fed. In a foreign land, with old promises still echoing, the family of Abraham begins to multiply. Joseph then settled his family in the best part of the land. He provided food for them during the famine, giving rations to his father, his brothers, and all their households according to their dependence. Meanwhile, the famine pressed on. Egyptians came to Joseph, begging for bread. He exchanged grain for their silver, then for their livestock, and finally for their land. Desperate to survive, they offered themselves as servants to Pharaoh. Joseph accepted and instituted a policy. 1/5 of future harvests would go to Pharaoh, while the rest would remain with the people for seed and sustenance. They agreed. What choice did they have? But they also praised Joseph, saying he had saved their lives. The Israelites, however, thrived, while Egypt's people sold everything just to eat. Jacob's family gained property and multiplied. They grew strong, even as others grew weak. As Jacob neared the end of his life, he called for Joseph. He made him swear not to bury him in Egypt. Instead, Jacob asked to be laid to rest with his fathers in the land of Canaan, where Abraham and Isaac were buried. Joseph promised, and Jacob bowed in peace, his request secured. The chapter contrasts two futures: the Egyptians, who lost land, freedom and livestock, and the Israelites, who gained all three. Yet in both stories, Joseph's hand remains central, guiding, negotiating, and preserving. As Jacob approached the end of his life, Joseph brought his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, to receive their grandfather's blessing. Jacob, now frail and nearly blind, summoned his strength and sat up. When he saw the boys, he asked who they were. Joseph said, "These are the sons God has given me here." And Jacob replied, "Bring them to me, so I may bless them." Jacob recalled how God had appeared to him at Luz and promised him descendants and a land to dwell in. And now he declared that Ephraim and Manasseh would be counted as his own sons, equal in standing with Reuben and Simeon, thus securing their place among the tribes of Israel. He viewed them not merely as grandsons, but as full heirs of the covenant. When Joseph positioned the boys for the blessing, he placed Manasseh, the elder, at Jacob's right hand, but Jacob crossed his arms, placing his right hand on Ephraim, the younger. Joseph tried to correct him, but Jacob refused, saying both would become great, yet Ephraim's descendants would surpass those of his brother. It was an intentional reversal, one last echo of a pattern repeated through Genesis. Then Jacob blessed Joseph, invoking the God who had shepherded him all his life, the angel who had delivered him from harm, and he asked that the same protection and legacy fall upon these boys. It was a moment of generational transfer, not just of name or property, but of divine promise. As the blessing ended, Jacob said something quietly prophetic, that Ephraim and Manasseh would become a model for future blessings in Israel. And to Joseph himself, he spoke of a portion of land, a ridge near Shechem, that he had taken, which would one day belong to Joseph's line. The chapter draws the reader's attention not to power or order, but to inheritance, the inheritance of faith, of promise, and of identity. Even as Jacob's life drew to a close, his eyes remained fixed on what would endure after him. Jacob is dying. The family gathers around him, sons standing in a semicircle, waiting for the final words of their father. But this is not a blessing in the soft sentimental sense. It is a reckoning. He speaks to each son in turn, not just as a father, but as a prophet. His words are poetic, symbolic, and sometimes hard. He does not sugarcoat the truth. Reuben, his firstborn, hears no praise. "You are unstable as water," Jacob says. His strength was undermined by impulse. He defiled his father's bed. Simeon and Levi, brothers in violence, are condemned together. Jacob recalls their rage, their slaughter of Shechem, their cruelty. "Let me not enter their council," he says. "I will scatter them in Israel." Then comes Judah, and here the tone shifts. Jacob speaks of a lion, powerful, majestic, unchallenged. "The scepter shall not depart from Judah," he says, "nor the ruler's staff from between his feet." This tribe, this line, will carry the promise of kings. Zebulun will dwell by the sea. Issachar, strong but burdened, will serve. Dan will judge his people, but also strike like a serpent on the path. Gad will be attacked but will overcome. Asher will be rich in food. Naphtali is a doe set free, graceful in movement. To Joseph, Jacob gives the longest blessing. He calls him a fruitful vine by a spring, with branches climbing over the wall. Though bitterly attacked, Joseph endured, and Jacob calls upon the God of his fathers, the Almighty, the Shepherd, the Rock, to bless Joseph with abundance and favor. Finally, Benjamin, a ravenous wolf, fierce and wild, dividing the spoils at day's end. With these final words, Jacob speaks not only to his sons, but to the tribes they will become. He offers a vision of the future, shaped by the character of each man. And then he gives one last request, to be buried not in Egypt, but in the cave of Machpelah, where Abraham and Sarah were buried, where Isaac and Rebekah lie, and where he buried Leah. He finishes speaking, gathers his feet into the bed, and breathes his last breath. Jacob, also called Israel, is now gone. The sons who gathered to hear his final words are now the patriarchs of tribes. A chapter ends, but a nation begins to take shape. With the death of Jacob, a long life marked by struggle and blessing came to a peaceful end. Joseph fell upon his father's body and wept, then gave instructions for his embalming, a process that took 40 days, followed by 70 more for mourning. Jacob had died in Egypt, but his heart had remained in Canaan. Joseph requested permission from Pharaoh to carry out his father's final wish, to be buried in the cave of Machpelah, alongside Abraham and Isaac. Pharaoh agreed, and what followed was a remarkable procession. Egyptian officials, elders, and servants travelled alongside Joseph and his brothers, with chariots and horsemen in tow. They crossed into Canaan in an enormous caravan of grief and reverence. At the threshing floor of Atad, just beyond the Jordan, they paused for 7 more days of mourning. The locals were so struck by the display that they named the site Abel Mizraim, the mourning of Egypt. Then Jacob was buried, just as he had requested, in the family tomb. When the brothers returned to Egypt, fear crept back into their hearts. With their father gone, they worried Joseph might finally take revenge. So they sent a message, claiming that Jacob had left a final plea for Joseph to forgive them. Joseph wept when he heard this. Then he reassured them directly, "You intended harm, but God intended it for good." His words were a recognition of the larger plan that had shaped all their lives. Joseph remained in Egypt, living long enough to see his great-grandchildren, and before his own death, he gathered his family once more. He reminded them of God's promise that one day their descendants would leave Egypt and return to the land sworn to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He asked them to carry his bones with them when that time came. And so Joseph died at 110 years old, embalmed and placed in a coffin in Egypt. The book that began with creation closed with a burial, not in despair, but in anticipation. A family had become a people, and their story would continue. And so ends the book of Genesis, but the journey is only beginning. This book is the very first book of the Bible, and it lays the foundation of so much more to come. Thank you so much for watching and making it all the way to the end. May God be with you.